Boom. All right, showtime. Select out the lecture. I'm recording. All right, that is awesome. Doing it all. Just moving that over here. So today we add more stuff to the plate of the Express apps that we're building. And what we're going to be adding is, let me just, this big, is authentication, so that we have users can authenticate, as well as sessions, so that we can keep track of the user as they migrate through our site, hitting different pages. We can still keep them authenticated by monitoring their session specifically. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, and it's going to be a lot of huge code along today. We're going to be building this thing out, and then in the afternoon you'll have a lab where you can extend it. We're going to build an app that's going to allow us to create a user and a password with Express Mongoose. Okay, then we're going to hash that password. Okay, and hashing is just a way of kind of obfuscating. Oh, I said that right. Obfuscating the password and combining it with some other secret characters, secret key. And unless you have that secret key, you can't kind of hash the same password. Just a kind of a crypto concept. Well, then we'll log in and check if the username and password match, right? So if the user is going to log in and create a username and password, well, then we need to do some validation that the user exists, that the password is indeed what they typed in. Once they logged in, we need to kind of stay logged in using Express sessions. So this is going to be a package that we're going to use. And if the user is in, they can see a special view and have access to another part of our site, right? So it's a way of providing access to additional content on our site and segmenting what an authorized user should see versus a non-authorized user. And then obviously the user can log out and like end or terminate their session. So that's kind of what we're looking to achieve today. Let me just zoom in here. Our app, oh, keep doing that. Our app is going to look like this. We are going to have a welcome screen, and that welcome screen is going to allow us to provide a login or a sign up, right? We might want a new user to join our site. That requires that we have them sign up, which also requires what kind of ultimate method if we wanted to create something. What would our route be? Like, what would that route method be? We wanted to take info, send it to the back end. Anyone want to just chime in on that?
Wouldn't that be like a put?
A put or a post, right? Posting data to the back end, right? In order to get something onto the back end. And so yesterday you learned, well, you've been using the post itself. We're not doing the method override. That's for like editing and deleting. And then to log in, we're just going to get and send our credentials. Okay, and then that's going to require this / is just, that's the default site. That's the site that we're going to go to. Once we click on these buttons, we'll go in one of two directions, right? Login takes us to sessions new. So this will be our controller, our sessions controller, and it'll have a new .ejs file that will provide us a form, username and password to submit, as well as a user's new for username and password. And so they can easily submit. It's the same type of form. We're making it really easy. We're just asking them to like create their username and then log in. What happens here, once they submit, if they're a new user and they submit, right? I'm saying if they're an existing user and they submit, they get redirected back to index, well, they'll have to like authenticate one more time. We'll have to be like, all right, we created you, go ahead and log in. So here, what if they, you know, they try to log in and they give them a username and password, right? Oh, this was for new users. I'm sorry. This was for authenticated users because we can see here that they're getting wrong password, username or password. So we try to authenticate you and it said no, so you're not going to get in. If it did, you'll be taken here to welcome the new user. And then you'll be able to kind of join the party. And the rest of this is going to be for the afternoon, which is you are going to extend the application to implement this as part of the lab. So the lab is going to be creating some messages and allowing users, the authenticated users, to log in, add a message, display those messages. So you'll be implementing all of that. Now, before we get started, what I kind of like doing is showing what you'd be doing, right? What's the ultimate end product? So here you go. Here's the app, okay? Our app is here, and if I click login, I deleted the accounts. Once again, I made sure everything works. So I'm like, hey, Joe, boop, user not found. It redirects me and says, you can't log in, right? Which should be this, right? Send wrong username or password. That's what it says here, but we're just saying, you know, user not found. That's what we're sending back. And I'm like, all right, cool. So what if I go ahead and sign up? I want to sign up. I want to create an account. I'm going to do Joe. Boom. Takes me back to log in now to validate that I've done this. And this happens a lot. There are some sites where the minute you create your username and password for the first time, they send you back in to authenticate yet again. Okay? Even sometimes when you reset your password, they have you go back to the home page to like re-authenticate because now they're going to establish a session. Okay, so now I'm going to log in. I'm going to do Joe, boom. And now I'm in, okay? Join the party just takes me to the join the party. So what I want you to kind of see here also is that the URLs that are changing too, right? So this is sessions new, right? If I kind of went back to users new, these are index.js files. This is the users controller, right? It's a user's routes that we're routing them to here, and it's going to control that. This sessions is going to be a route, and that's going to be some sort of controller managing all of that. We get back here. Now it's welcome to the party, right? Welcome, my name, so it knows who I am, and then I have access to join the party. So there must be some conditional logic here, because now that I'm back on the home page, I don't see the login anymore. So it knows me, so there must be conditional logic that says, if the user is authenticated, send them this thing now. Send them this part of the, maybe a partial of some sort, to now they can join the party. Or they can log out, right? Because if I log out, I don't know what happened. Yeah, if I log out, I'm back to the default route with the log in and or the sign up button, right? That's the ultimate functionality that we see. And, we can also, if I move this over here, let me just put this down a little bit. If I went into, have this all set up, there's NodeMon. Here is this Mongo, right? We can show DBS. I can see that this Auth lessons subdatabase was created. I can use Auth lessons, right? Now I'm in it. I can show collections. I can see that, is it not the Auth users? Should have been, right? It is show collections, right?
You added the lessons. It should be just lesson, I think.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Show lesson, show collections. Boop. We see users, and if we do db.find, right, I should see, it's db.users.find, right? Okay. Boom. And then I see the user. User account's created. This is the password. I typed in a 3-letter password, and yet I see here a password that is very long, nothing close to what I typed in. And this is part of the whole bcrypt suite where it takes its hashing algorithm, takes what you gave it, mixes it together, and it produces this. So that's the ultimate goal. We'll see it later. I just kind of wanted to show you the process, what we're going to wind up doing, and all the steps that are leading up to that. Okay, so big code along.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
So this essentially you would use, so like if you had a forum that's like, hey, subscribe to my page, so you'd have something set up like this so that you could have in your database a list of subscribers.
I mean, you
Something
could,
like that.
you wouldn't, for this particular instance, what we're setting up is, you know, authentication too, like sessions and authentication. If I only wanted to capture somebody's username and email address, then I could just use a form, which is what these are, right? This is just a form. Once they submit it, I could then like add it to the database and then redirect them back to a home page, right? I don't necessarily need to log them in if I just want to collect their username, like their first and last name, and the email address, or just solely an email address. I don't need this layer of complexity to do that. But if I did want to collect there and have them log in and have them register with an email address, which is probably what you're going to want to do, right? Somebody's password's not going to work one day. You're going to want to email it. That also allows me to collect user information, right? And collecting users' email addresses is a commodity out there, right? People pay good money for email addresses, like a list of email addresses, or as you accumulate them, you can start marketing to them, okay? So it may be something that you always want to do. I do it all the time too when I'm teaching my D3 workshops, or even the classes that I teach in the evening. I grab those email addresses, and the next time I teach a custom thing, a custom workshop, I email out everyone. I want to like promote the class that I'm going to be teaching and maybe get more people to sign up, right? So I'm always collecting email addresses as well. At some point in time when you graduate, you'll hear from me like, hey, I'm teaching this thing, and you'll know. Cool. So I wanted to show what we were trying to do, okay? Just going to move this. This is our ultimate structure that we're going to be setting up, to just so that you have an overview of the actual thing itself, right? We'll have a views folder. We'll have a models folder. We're going to be creating a model. We'll have our controllers for sessions and users controllers, right? With our views, we'll have partials and sessions and users. Okay, we'll have a standard index page with some stuff, our server page. We're going to build this all out. I just want to give you an overview of what it is that we will be doing. So I'm just going to move that out of the way so we don't have that in our way. Okay. So I'm going to give you a moment to go into your student examples folder for today's lecture, and we'll be doing it from there. And then we'll start our coding. Okay. Let's just do this. Let's make sure everybody's good. So thumbs up when you're ready to go. Right. So just click on the thumbs up. Let me know you're ready to go. We're going to run this long command in just a minute. I want to make sure everyone's in the folder. I'm also in the folder. I'm going to shut down Mongoose. I'm going to get out of there. I'm going to Control-C out of MongoD. If I'm in MongoD, and later on when I try to spin up our new server and access Mongo, it's going to say, hey, this thing is already running on another port, or an instance of it is already running. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm in instructor examples. This is where we shall be. Okay, so you got 15. There's going to be a lot of typing. There's going to be some copy and paste. Some of you are going to hit errors, obviously, because of the syntax is off. So what I'm going to try to suggest is, if you do hit something, if we just did something really small and the thing doesn't work, the thing that you typed doesn't work, try just copying and pasting what's in the README, just to see if it works. If it does, awesome. Undo it to go back to what you had and just take a look at it and like kind of understand what you did. Maybe you missed a forward slash or a semicolon or something so small that if you just copied and pasted, you could like jump back into the lecture, or at least you could see where you went off. I only kind of emphasize that because I want you, as you enter your project mode week, to really know how to kind of work through some of those issues. And even though you'll be typing a lot of stuff, there may be instances where, you know, you're typing something that doesn't work and you're looking at a previous lab that had it almost exactly. You copy and paste that and you change just the name of something, like the route name, the thing might work. And you'll move ahead in the project versus like being stuck for an hour trying to resolve one small thing. I'm all about just kind of be as efficient as possible. Cool. Looks good. Looks like we're going to do this. I'm going to run this. I'm going to paste this in just a minute. What we're going to be doing here is creating that structure. Okay. So that structure, all those files, if we did do this by hand, guaranteed, you know, I don't know, 1/3 of the class would have fat fingered something, something wouldn't be called something. It's just the way it is. I do it all the time, right? I mean, I was doing the database and I added an S instead of leaving off the S. So I'm going to just paste this and let it run. I'm going to Slack this out now. Okay, boom. You're going to copy and paste that as well. And we're going to let this thing run. Okay. Go back here. There we go. Looks good. I've only seen something like this be an issue. Sometimes people, maybe their internet's a little slow, their machine's a little slow, downloading some of the new tools or installing everything we need. And then we'll go through everything that we just did, okay? Get this thing here, put this down. Here. Looks good, looks good. Looks got 10 so far. And if it did install correctly, you should see something like that, right? I'm gonna expand mine and make sure, like I see pretty much everything there. See, you know, my controllers and make sure controllers is there. There'll be nothing inside of those files just as yet. We're gonna be adding those things. Node modules, we'll see a bunch of node models, our views, right? We'll have app, partials, sessions, and users. We should have our, we're gonna create our index. I don't think it created the index. Let me just make sure. Touch views index. Okay, so that's where it is. We have this env file. We'll go into that. Our gitignore file. The key, that package JSON, right? That's a must for any app, right? That all came from this command right here. Boop. Is what executed all of our required supported packages. And they got installed in the sequence and added here in the same sequence. .env, EJS, express, method override, mongoose. Okay, we're at 17. Back, let's make sure. 23, awesome, cool. So we're all good. We all have our file structure, our node modules installed, our package JSON. And so now we're gonna we're going to start building, okay? One of the things that's going to be key to using Heroku, as well as creating some sort of global scope within our application, is using this .env package, okay? .env is like our environmental variables. That's really what it's going to translate into. And if we go take a look at the docs, just to see what the docs say this thing should do. It's a package, and there's going to be a lot of information here. So .env is a zero dependency module that loads environmental variables from an env file into process.env. So within Node, there is this process command, and I actually have access to it within Node itself. Sometimes when I teach Node and functions, certain things get passed in, and we can actually query certain things from within the function that are just kind of global to the environment. And so process env is kind of one of those things. So we can store configuration in the environment separate from our code. Okay, so we're not necessarily mutating the environment. We're just saying, hey, load these things in, and if my app's not running, it won't be part of the environment at the time. And so what we're going to need to do is install it, which we did. They show you two different ways, npm and yarn. Yarn is the other big one to do it. And then we need to use it. So here's the require env. So in order for us to use our new env file, we have to require it. So I'm going to go back, and let's add that to our server.js. So our server.js, the first thing that we are going to do is require the use .env to import configs. I'm just going to put here a little note, right? And so what we're going to do is this: use require the keyword .env .config, and that's a method. Okay. Now the fact that we've done this means that when our server does start, our server will look for something very specific. Now the thing that it's looking for are the configs. So you have to port configs, and I'm just going to put here from the .env file. Okay. So .env is hard-coded. It's hard-coded within the construct of the application to look inside of this file, okay? The .env file is a hidden file, right? We don't want to expose it to the rest of the world. And the other thing that we don't want to do is to push it up, too. So if I go to git ignore, you'll see that it's not getting pushed up either, okay? Let's go back to the env file, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to create our environmental variables, and we're going to use uppercase here to distinguish that it is an environmental variable. So port is equal to 3000. Okay. So anytime once our app loads, we can reference the keyword or the variable, global variable port anywhere, and we should have access to it. Okay. So the next one that we're going to import is MongoDB underscore URI. It's equal to MongoDB : 2 / local host : 27017 / auth lesson. Okay. And so what we're saying here is that this is our connection to our Mongo sub-database, right? So auth lessons is that sub-database that we're connecting to. This is the port that we're going to be listening in on. Okay. Later on, or tomorrow when we do push up to Heroku, you'll see that Heroku will also be using this particular environmental variable on the server side up there to point to the database that it has configured. So these settings right now are for us, for our local environment, but we'll also, if we look on Heroku, we would see that that specific URL, that naming convention is the same naming convention that they'll be using, okay? And so now that we have this, right, now we're gonna access these variables in our server.js, right? That was the idea, okay? So in our server.js, we're gonna configure our server.js to have access to those things because that's really where we're gonna be using it. We do, however, once again, just gonna point out, we have this git ignore, and because we have a git ignore, our node modules nor our env file will ever get pushed up to GitHub. Okay, we don't want, because we're gonna add some other stuff here later on. Remember the secret key that I said that we're gonna use for the hashing algorithm? That also is gonna be added here. And that's not something we want the rest of the world to see, because now they have this key, which means now they can start kind of hacking our server and just using the key and whatever password, and maybe they'll get a match. Without that key, it really makes it hard to kind of hack away at our server. So we got that, right? Just make sure everyone's on the same page, right? Got that. Oh man, this does the same thing all the time. Cool. Okay, everyone good with that? Just want to make sure you got it. Click away, whatever icons you want. So be key later. A lot of the times, and just, you know, while everyone's clicking away on it, just make sure like the path is all correct. A lot of the times someone forgets to add, you know, this / here. If that's not there, it's going to break. Or they forget this / it's going to break. So there's a good chance someone might have already forgotten that, and that's the kind of thing I'm going to say. If you see the error message and it tells you to go here, let's ultimately kind of copy and paste and see. So now we're going to go to the server side. Okay, so we have our .config file. That's all done. Now we're going to start adding some of our dependencies. Dependencies. Okay, so we're going to set up our dependencies here. I'm going to say const express is equal to require express, right? We want to use the express module. Const method override is equal to require method override. Okay, awesome. Const mongoose is equal to require mongoose. They moved the .NET V down here, but it's fine where it is. It can stay at the top. Const app is equal to express. Okay, so now we're going to configure our server. These are our dependencies. And then we're going to set configuration, or I'm just going to put here configuration. Let me just put a kind of a space between some of these things so we can clearly see where one section begins and one section kind of ends. And so here we're going to set our port. Const port is equal to process.env.port uppercase. This is key right here. Uppercase, JavaScript's case sensitive. Inside of our env file, port is uppercase. So we need to be consistent with how we wrote it. Okay, we're making this uppercase also. Sometimes const variables, sometimes they do. Sometimes not only is const used as a way to convey and make it known that this thing is a const variable and that it cannot be changed, but also uppercase naming conventions for variables are also used to convey that this thing is a const variable. So I'm going to say const mongo URI is equal to process.env.mongo underscore URI. Okay? So we set our configurations. We loaded that up. Awesome. I'm going to set the middleware. Set middleware. Okay. And in here, what does middleware allow us to do? Well, this particular middleware, right, is going to allow us to use put and delete methods, right? So this particular one here, and we're using app.use, and we're saying method override underscore method, right? And then we're going to add here also just another configuration, parses info from our input fields into an object. Okay, and this is app.use. We're going to use Express, has their own little package to do this, URL encoded. There's other packages, encoded, and it takes in an object extended false. Okay, and so we have our configuration here, and this is important here. I think I was kind of online watching some of you troubleshoot the other day, like as went to lunch, you were still on, and that this method, for whoever was troubleshooting it, was added towards the very bottom, and they couldn't get the thing to update or the thing to delete because all these other routes were running, and then this thing was running at the very end. The sequence, I just want to kind of emphasize that the sequence of this, all of this, the way it runs is important, because as the request comes in, certain packages grab that data and they do something to the data. Sometimes they query for something, and then sometimes they add additional information. Okay, it's no different than, like, you know, the way Express uses params, right? If you send it something with a param, it automatically like creates an object and populates the thing with params, or query, right? So when you do this, it's looking, this method override method is actually looking at the request that came in. It's looking to see if there's a query string that is equal to underscore method. And if there is, it then does something under the hood. Once it's done, it passes it on to something else in this cycle of middleware. So just know that middleware is a concept that allows us to examine the data as it comes in, this request, do things that we feel we need to do, and that's why the middleware is there, and then that middleware then passes on the final thing to what needs to get done. So this is our process. This is our kind of assembly line of, like, grab the thing, take a look, add the thing. Does it have the other thing? Pass it on, and then it'll pass it on to the next middleware. And then so some middlewares are very dependent on other middlewares. Okay, and if you didn't have the middleware before, that's going to break the next one because it's expecting something. Okay. Let's move on to configuring the database. So database config. I'll just put a config and connection. And we're going to say mongoose dot connect, right? So we're going to connect to the Mongo URI, right? Which is this right here. So we know where to connect to. Okay. We're going to pass an object, use new URL, parser, it's true. And then we're going to say mongoose.connect once. Just want to connect to the thing once. We're going to open it. We're going to pass in.
That has to be mongoose connection that once.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, Jeremy. Connection. Then we're going to connect, and we're just, for now, we're just going to console log connected to Mongo. That's what we're going to do, right? Make sure that looks good. So again, I'm going to compare. Jeremy pointed it out. I mistyped it. These are commands, by the way. You know, we could do this. I could teach Express for the unit, and then we move on to something else. And by unit, the last unit, we're teaching Rails. We're teaching a different construct altogether. The minute the cohort restarts, we jump back into like 3 weeks of just JavaScript and jQuery and HTML. That this stuff isn't something that we're ever just going to inherently remember unless I teach this material over and over and over again. 10, 20 cohorts, would I be able to write this stuff out? And I also use in the day class in New York, we used a different kind of database. So the syntax that I was writing for that is different than the syntax for this, but it still follows the same kind of structure. The naming convention is different, but you still have to perform the same operations to get the thing running, or the same config. Okay, so now let's configure our server to listen. App.listen. We're going to listen on. Yeah.
On parser, you're missing the R at the end of parser.
Parser right there. Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. So I feel like I'm going to be the ones having all the problems today. Cool. Do this. That arrow. I'm just going to console log. Auth happening on port. And then we can just say the port. Once again, all we'd have to do at this point in time, go into env, change the port number. A lot of the times when I'm spinning up several applications at once, all configured to use port 3000. If I'm examining homeworks and I want to have two of the apps open simultaneously to test things, I have to go in and change the port number because I can't have two apps listening on the same port 3000. So here we're just going to create our route, one route. We'll do app.get / right? Here is our rec, res, that arrow, and then we're just going to res.send, just going to send the message index route. Obviously, we will be replacing that with our index route once we have it, okay? We're just going to test this all out, make sure it works, and then we'll take a break. So we're going to go here to start up our MongoD, right? So in the browser here, in the terminal, I'm just going to start up MongoD in one terminal window. I'm going to start it up, okay? In another terminal window, I'm going to cancel out this server. Quit. Let's see, right? I'm going to pwd, make sure, okay. I'm going to go to this one. This is the server that I'm working in. So I'm going to get rid of that, pwd. Let's see, pwd. See that I'm in our server. I'm where I need to be. Awesome. Cool. So now I'm just going to do nodemon. Make sure that the server works. And it works. Now, of course, if the eagle eyes out there didn't pick out some of these little one-offs in my typing, I would have had errors, right? So if I did, just stop the server, and maybe I got rid of that R again like I did before, would the server have worked? Nope, I'm getting the deprecation warning, but that's okay. But this still seemed to work, right? No options is not supported. So it's telling me that the new user parse is not supported. So we'd have to go here. But the server works. It's just telling me, hey, this thing that you typed in, is it a break for the application? Like it's not going to stop it necessarily from breaking at this point in time, but it's definitely going to have an issue later on. You can keep going, but we're going to have some problems. Cool.
My nodemon crashed.
Mine too.
Mine too.
Oh boy. All right. Well, you want to share your screen? And we'll
Happened to me too. It's if you go to the const mongo URI, in the instructions it doesn't say mongodb _URI, but when I put in the DB like Joe did, it worked. Just after mongo _URI.
Wait, in the .env file?
No, in the configuration on server.js.
So you're saying line 11 and 12, right?
Line 12. At the end of the uppercase Mongo, just add the DB.
Oh,
Yeah, Joe,
yeah, that did it.
in the actual markdown here between set configuration and where we set up the .env file, those
Yep.
names don't match.
Oh, yes, I see. So we gotta, that's a typo there. Okay, we have to update the README file for that.
Cool. Thanks.
It's MongoDB, right? I'll do that later though. I'll make a note to update the documentation for that.
That was one of my errors, but now I'm getting port is not defined. So something's wrong with my .env file.
So then did you require at the very top?
Did you capitalize P-O-R-T?
Mm-hmm. Take a look at your port. Do you want to share? We can just take a quick look.
I'm just looking and see if I'm missing anything, but I think
Okay.
I have everything that's supposed to.
All right.
Yeah. Well, let me pull it up. Yeah. You got to stop sharing.
Oh, hey.
My dog was underneath my chair, and I moved and scared him.
Okay, so port 3000, MongoDB. So that's not going to be the issue there, right? Okay. So here it's, oh, you see where you do const on line 7? We did const port. I had done it as uppercase. So const, the variable name of const is uppercase. I'm sorry, the variable name of port, that's uppercase there. And at the end of line 7 is also uppercase.
They're both uppercase.
The whole word is uppercase.
Oh.
That's it. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone
Okay.
else?
Yeah, me next.
Okay, go ahead, Dan. Share your screen. Okay. What do you cannot find module mongoose? Right? I think because you have a space there. Yeah.
I just saw it.
Got it. You know, it's funny because you've been looking at it for a while now. And
Okay.
what's the other one? URI.
URI.
Is that what it says?
Yeah.
Like the URI parameter to open URI must be a string, and it says, what is it setting? It's getting it undefined.
Our screen,
Same thrower.
you need a brace.
Where at?
After config, require .mb.config. You need a.
Oh yes, at the very top too. You see you see we're on line 2. On line 2, config is a method.
Oh.
So being a method, it needs to load it up. Otherwise, you're just kind of like calling the method to run. You're just calling the internals of a method, not actually having it run. So save that.
Okay. Anything else?
And maybe something else. I mean, you understand? But just save it so that we can say servers. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Connected to Mongo, right?
Wait. Thanks, guys.
Sweet. Anybody else?
I have one.
Cool. Show. Let's do it. Let's do it. So what do you got here? Database names cannot contain the character / So database names. Now our database name was inside of env, right? So go into env. That's where we defined it. You have 2 / at the end. It's just one. So it sees the first one as like, hey, this is the path to the thing, right? This is the URL. And the second / is being like, you want to name the thing with a auth _ lesson with a / You can't do that.
Okay.
Cool?
Thanks.
Well, that was pretty painless. Yeah.
So I'm getting the port 3000 already in use.
Oh, that means that you have or opened up another Node app listening on port 3000. So if you don't know, like if I was to go into
Like I went into Activity Monitor and I don't see any other node things running.
I would, if it's saying that it's in use, then something else is using it. for the time being, Jeremy, the easiest fix for that, without like, hey, let's find the thing, is just go and change the port number to be 3001. If you do that, it'll work. And then a lot of the times, you know, that app.listen on line 27 that we wrote is really relevant sometimes, because when I start up my server, I can see the port that this particular application is running on. So then I know when I'm loading up 5 or 6 different apps, I'll know if they're ever going to conflict and which one it would have conflicted with. Because I'll see like, oh, it's running on 3001, or this one's running on 3002. So sometimes, just to avoid the complexities of running multiple servers, I give them like port 4000, port 5000, and like a whole genre of servers run on port 5000 that I'm working with.
Well, it looks like it coded some type of 3000 file in my EJS authorization folder. Like if I do an ls, here, let me show you.
Okay, yeah, sure, because that seems a little weird.
So yeah, I did an ls just to see, like, make sure all the stuff was in my folder. So here's like a 3000 in my folder.
Okay. Yeah, we don't see it there though. Even if it's there, I don't see.
It should work now because I switched it to.
You can delete the folder. I mean, does the server? Yeah, so 3000 works. I just don't know, like, creating a file that's called 3000 would interfere with a server listening on a port. But you know, just try removing 3000.
Huh.
Oh, don't leave out the. You don't put a semicolon there.
Well, now there's one for 3001.
All right, so something's going on.
Does it matter that I have semicolons here? In the CNV file?
Yeah, get rid of the semicolon.
So that's a no-no?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen them with semicolons. I'd have to take a look at the docs, but I don't use semicolons. It's not necessarily a JavaScript file, right? There's no JavaScript extension on this. So that's just a weird thing. I don't think I've seen that happen before. Get rid of them. So it's saying no such file, right? Weird. Okay. I mean, try starting up on port. Try starting it up now, even though it's on port 3001. It's not really going to make a difference.
Yeah, it works. It's running.
Right. So we can always figure out how to delete those files. Cool? We're good? Everyone good now? Awesome. So let's do this. Before we kind of jump into the rest, I think we're about kind of like reaching on break time. Why don't we take a 10? You know, it's 12:12. Why don't we come back at 12:22? And then we'll jump into the rest. And if you did have any issues, anyone still having issues with something, just kind of reach out. I'm just going to run get some water. I'll come back. All right, so break time. Come back at 12. Why don't we make it 12:20, 12:23? How about that? Give you the extra minute. Sweet.
No, come with a picture. Come with a picture. Yeah, I'm coming back in here. Oh, I thought that. It's me.
Boom. Okay. Awesome. That. So now that we have our server up and running, right? Everything looks pretty good. I'm gonna test it, right? I mean, we tested it here, but we did not test it here, right? So local host 3000, you should get index route, right? I'm just assuming you probably tested it earlier. But if not, just test it, open up a browser window, make sure the thing works. You get index route, then we're ready to move on. Okay. Once again, if it didn't if the terminal didn't crash when you did node mod, this is almost certain to work unless you forgot the route or maybe you mistyped something here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. All right. So we're going to add some boilerplate. You did go over partials this morning, and I think there was like a question like, when would you use partials? Just think that you're building out a page, right? And that page is going to be a construct of multiple sections. If a section is something that's repeatable on multiple pages, perfect use case for a partial. One of those perfect use cases for partials are things that go in the head of a site. Okay, so if a site is using something like Bootstrap that needs to be loaded on every page, well then the Bootstrap URL, the CSS, the JavaScript URL would need to be inside of the head on every page. Otherwise, Bootstrap's not going to work. Okay, now we have several files that were created. We're not going to touch these two right now, the app messages new and app messages views, app messages, both of these. This looks like they duplicated here too. We're not going to touch that. That's going to be for later as part of the bonus/lab. We're going to be focused in on creating a partials right here, this particular one, partials for the head. We're going to add some information into it, script tags and link tags. And then we'll have a new EJS, and this is just going to be a form similar to the form that was for like new, to create a user and like to log in. Both forms looked almost identical. Okay, similar to the session form. There's just going to be a few nuances that will change. And then the index, kind of like that's our splash screen, right? The hit it, views, index, boom, that's our page. So what we're going to do is in the head, I'm going to go into the partials folder and I'm going to look inside head EJS, and there's nothing in there right now. Okay, and what we're going to do is I'm going to take all of this. Let me grab all of this. Oop. I'm going to paste it and then I'll share it out. Just do this real quick. Script tag, meta characters, right? Just want to make sure everything is kind of lined up and it looks good. I didn't miss anything. All right, cool. Now take this and copy it. Let me slack it out. Boom. And then just give me a thumbs up when you've copied and pasted it and saved it into your head. And I'll explain what's happening. Sweet. While you're doing that, I'll just kind of talk to it. We are importing some fonts, some Google fonts. I'm not sure, did we go over importing fonts in Unit 1? Was that something that we did? Can anybody like say yes, no, maybe? I don't know if that's just
we did.
You did, right? All right, so importing fonts, easy enough. We also are using a materialize, the name of the front end layout is materialize. And so the previous instructor that taught this put this together. They wanted to use materialize. They're a visual learner. I noticed yesterday when you were building out all those routes that they, you know, the front end looked, I don't know, didn't look pretty, right? Buttons were just generic buttons. There was no styling. It was all about functionality and no aesthetics. But sometimes you want aesthetics. You want things to look nice. And so this materialize right here, materialize, is this front end. So if I was just to do, hey, materialize, I think I had it, materialize. It's just a framework. Like you can almost see from these colors and the buttons that kind of look like what I had earlier. Like this particular button looked like the sign in or sign up. That color was being used. And so they just have different themes that you can use. And you can take a look at their showcase of things that were kind of built using the materialized front end layout. We're not going to go into it. I've taught it before, just as, once again, an alternative to something like Bootstrap. So I'm not going to stay in there, but what it does, it will allow us to leverage specific class names, and those class names will have specific CSS associated with them inside of this materialize min CSS file. If we assign the class, it'll go in there, pull out the styling, and make it look similar to how materialize does it. They also have a JavaScript file in case we wanted to leverage any of their kind of JavaScript functionality, maybe like a mouse over of something, right? Or a overlay. So if I have a box and I have an overlay and I move my mouse and it turns like a gray shade of a light grade of gray with some text, the functionality is already built into it. So this is just kind of a tool to use that developers will to structure their content, add functionality without you having to write all of that code from scratch. So that's just our head. So I just wanted to kind of give you a backdrop as to why we're using that particular library. And because we want the materialized styling to be available on every particular page within our sites, we need to include it on every page. But if at any point in time we decide that, or materialize updates something and we need a new script tag, we only have to go one place to update the script tag, right? Because all the other pages will be pointing to this single point of reference. So if we needed to add more script tags to support our JavaScript functionality later, right? We could add the script tags here, add our custom CSS, we could add it here, okay? The next one that we're gonna do is the index EJS. Okay, so here's our index EJS, and this one we'll kind of write out because I want to go through some of the classes, and then for the new we're going to copy and paste a few of them. But for this, if we want to do leverage index HTML, I can just say HTML and just do tab, and I would have the structure, right? So half of our structure is already done, right? Just doing HTML tab gives us the structure, right? I think when I was teaching this, we installed Emmet. I don't know if anybody's been using Emmet. I know Matt doesn't really use it, but you might have started to use it. So now that we have it inside of our head, right? So here's our head. We don't need these things right now, right? We don't really need a title. If we wanted to add a title, we could. That would be what's in the tab. I'm going to get, actually, we could leave it. I'm just going to, in the title, say, my app. Just the when you load it later, we'll make a reference to it. Like that's what people see in the tab. So we don't have to delete it. We can keep it there. But what we do want to do is add a partial. And we're using EJS. So EJS uses this construct. Now I'm just creating the construct. I always kind of like to have the beginning and the end of the EJS symbols and then go inside of it just so that I never forget. I know I created it. We use the include keyword. That's just going to say, hey, EJS, we're going to include, look inside partials and look for something called head.ejs. That's what we're looking at, okay? So because index is here, right, at this level, we can just tell it to where you're at find the partials folder, and go inside of it. Versus the double, what's the difference? Can anyone tell me what the difference would be if I added one extra dot here? What's the command that we're actually telling this file to do? Anybody know the difference between one dot?
Come out of that directory, I mean, one step out.
Exactly. Yeah, two dots means go up one directory, and then in that directory, look for a partials folder. Single dot means where you're at right now. Look for a partials folder. That thing is right next to you somewhere. It's a sibling to you, so go find it. And since index is right here, right, and it's sitting in the folder structure, it is a sibling element to the partials folder. So we're like, hey, just looking at right here, okay? So now that we have that, we can then go and add our HTML. So I'm just going to say, div, we have class of container. And class of container is a very, very common class to use when we're doing these front-end frameworks. So I'm just going to end it. Container is almost always some sort of mean element that is used for layout and structure. I'm going to do an H1. Can I just do H1? I don't know if Emmet, I'm just going to see if my Emmet is working. No, so my Emmet's not working. So H1, welcome, H1, right? Okay, and then we'll do an H2 and say, please, H2. And then we're going to add an anchor tag here. Anchor tag is going to take us someplace, okay? What we're going to be doing is adding those specific materialized classes, which you might, once again, the fact that you're being exposed to them, you might be like, hey, I like this styling. I'm just going to take a look at materialize and work it into my project. Here we're going to have this waves effect is a class. Then there's waves light. And then BTN, really to style the button. So I think waves is the green color. And there's an effect to it. There's a color to it. And there's a styling specific for the button. And then we're going to say href is equal to, when they click on it, don't really go anywhere. That's with the pound sign. Don't really go anywhere. Stay right here. And then sign up. We'll close our anchor tag. And we're going to close the H2. So this actually looks like, so it looks like there is a syntax error here, right? From what I'm looking at here, I see a please H2, and then I see this closing H2 here. So there is no closing H2 at the end of this, okay? See it here, but it's already been closed here, so don't add it. I'm gonna go to the next one, we'll say H3, and we'll say, or close the H3. And once again, we're just gonna add this thing in here. For this, I think, for the sake of it, I'm just gonna copy, paste the anchor tag. It's the same effects. The only thing that's really changing is the log in syntax, okay? That's really all we're doing. All right, did I have this container? I think I have one extra div here. I'm gonna get rid of my extra div. That looks pretty good, okay? Personally, I'm just gonna tab those in a little bit to really make it seem like they are nested. I'm gonna save it. It's pretty good. All right. I'm gonna go to, well, let me just do this. Let's make sure. Test this out, make sure everyone is at least good with that. Okay. Let's click on thumbs up when you get that. It's pretty good. All right. Sweet. And then for our form here. Now, earlier when we had seen the actual form itself, right? The form, let me just see if I can pull up what the form looks like, right? So the form, just without leaving the screen, that's the form. And for our users new, this would have been users new, right? Username and password, and this little green button. Okay, and then for sessions new, pretty much identical. Identical in structure. They're both the same. They're using the same kind of structure. The only things that will change at some point in time are the routes that we use, that we post this information to. Those are the things that are going to change. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to copy this. I'll Slack it out. We're not going to type all that out. I can guarantee you I will have a dozen errors, and everyone else will. And we're going to go to the users new EJS file and just paste it. That's it. And all we're doing here is looking to put a form. We'll test this form out in just a minute, but we'll have our form here. It has 2 rows. So if I collapse these, you'll see that there's 2 rows associated with this. Or is there 1 row? 1 nested row? That's 2 rows. And you'll see username, right? And then this one for your password. And we'll cover some of the other things like what validates and required will do. Some of that stuff is just materialize, and others is HTML. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do the copy and paste. Once again, there's a lot to do. So in sessions new, I'm going to go to sessions new. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to save it, and I will Slack this out. Okay. And here, as of right now, they really are kind of identical to one another. I don't think there's anything, username, password, right? Username, password, they're really all identical. Yeah.
A question about that, because the only difference between these 2 files is there's an H1 tag that one's for login and one's for creating the user.
Yep.
Is there any benefit to like just copying all of the divs into like as a partial, or is it because would that be too complicated because these things like do different things? They
are going to do different things. We're going to send them different places. But I think in the end, if it works, we can go back and test using them as partials. If there really is nothing different between these 2 files, like we're not going to be adding anything unique to this one versus that one, then I would use them as partials, right? Because if all they're doing is the identical same thing, and maybe like you said an H1, right? So if there's an H1 here but not an H1 there, I don't think that's going to make a difference. So we could do the partials also. Let's just, we'll get it.
Sorry, so like for now, just like kind of leave it, and then later on if you can refactor it and make it, because maybe right now it might be too complicated to figure out like what,
yeah,
what can be a partial. Okay.
I mean, setting up partials isn't really all that hard, right? It's just putting it into the, we're only using this partials folder as a syntactic way to indicate that these are partials, right? That's the only thing. It's not a, EJS requires a partials folder. It's just, that's what partials usually go. So when you're looking at somebody's Express app, you're like, oh, where are your partials? They're in the partials folder. That's kind of where they should be. So it wouldn't be too hard to kind of refactor it to do that. We can test it out. Let's get it working. And maybe we just give it a shot and see if it works. So now we have to do one more thing to get the server to work. Okay? All that is to go to the server.js file, right? And server.js is really just rendering, text. It's doing a res.send. That's what it's doing. It's sending text. So res.send isn't going to work anymore, right? We want to do a res.render. Render is the keyword that tells Express that we want to render a index.ejs. We want to render some sort of template. That's the goal. We want to render a template, right? So we're going to do that. I'm going to save it. And now we're going to test it. Like I'm saying, every time I see this thing starts up again. Okay, cool. Now we go to localhost, and I test, and voila, we should have it, right? Should be. Cool.
It's not working for me.
Okay. So let's take a look. Yeah, Molly, I just took a look at the both of those, the new EJS for both sessions and users. And we are going to be extending our form at some point in time with 2 different actions, which really means at this point in time, they are 2 different things. Now, that being said, I could possibly take the internals, you know, and just have this as the EJS portion, right? If all of this is identical and only this would be unique, well, then we could turn this into a partials, right? And then save that. And if we ever needed to edit something, because the only thing is this. One is going to go to sessions and another is going to go to users. And that's the difference. All right, who's having the issue?
That was me.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. You want to share? Let's take a look.
Oh, I think I may have.
You got it? Okay.
I think I might. I think I have it in the wrong. Is this the users? Is it supposed to be in the user, not the app?
Yeah, both of these are in either sessions or users.
Maybe that's why.
Okay.
Okay.
You're good. Yeah.
EJS, so that's why I got confused.
Okay. You're good. Sweet. That was easy. That's an easy day. Not as many errors. I think maybe I had more errors than everyone else. All right. So we tested. We know that it works. Now, nothing really happened. You can click on this thing. And you see the effect, like the fact that that button has that effect is part of that materialize JS file that's in our header, right? If I hover over it, you get that effect. If I click on it, it kind of waves. That's part of this. Let me see here. Where do we see the index? This waves, waves, right? That's part of it. So we get a waves effect, it's a wave light, and it's a button. We started removing things, you'd see them change. Cool. So we got all of that done. That's pretty much the initial setup. What we're going to do now is go into the second README. Here, let me select this out. Okay. Kind of our second README file that we're going to be working with. Okay. So this is kind of a 3-part thing today. The last part, you're going to be working as a lab to do it. And so looking at our diagram, we see, let me just kind of zoom in a little bit. Oh, keep going to the image. It's so annoying clicking on it. We see that these buttons, right? These buttons should go appropriately to those EJS files that we just created, right? So clicking on login should take us to sessions. Sessions is going to validate our account and establish a user session so we can start browsing around. And if sessions is authenticated, well, then it's going to redirect us to another page, right? Using res.redirect. Okay, and new users would take us to the sign up page where we would sign up, send our account to the database, redirect us back to the login where we log in. And then if we log in successfully, we once again go through the process. Open up this, go here, and then we would have link to join the party, and then we'd be in the party, right? So that's our ultimate goal. In order to do this, though, we need to go into our controllers, right? I'm just curious. You worked with controllers for the last couple of days, correct, with Matt? Is that correct? I know you did it yesterday. I think you did it the day before also. Can somebody just kind of express, or say you're on an interview and it's like, hey, what are your controllers? How would you describe what a controller is doing? Does anyone have a way to express a controller? I mean, You know what you're doing with it. You've done it, gone through the code alongs, you've created it. Matt's explained it, you've configured it. Now, because remember, controllers are part of that MVC model, right? Model, view, controllers. And so
I think I thought we only did controllers briefly yesterday.
Oh, it was only introduced yesterday. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
think so.
Okay, you understand what the model is, right? We understand models. You've been creating models with the schema, right? Creating a model based on a schema. You know what a view is. I mean, we're working with EJS, and you've been doing views since like Unit 1, creating an HTML page to render stuff. A controller is kind of like, it's almost like the middleware between the view and the model, right? So a user interacts with the view, and then the user's like, I want to do something. It goes to the controller, and the controller's like, hey, let me try to figure out what you're trying to do. If you need information from the database, I get the data from the database. If I need to generate a new view to render this data, then I render a new view. So your controller is the middleman between the user interfacing with your app and getting access to the data if need be. You may not even need sometimes to get access to the database to see something. Maybe you're just playing a game where you're processing code. Like you're playing tic-tac-toe and the controller's just responsible to keep track of what you're doing. Nothing ever gets written into the database at this point. You win or lose, that's it, you wipe it out. And I never wrote anything to the database. That would be conceptually the controller also. The controller is controlling. It's kind of like the logic of your app, right? Server.js is the structure of our application. That's our application kind of server logic. Right? We need all these things in this particular order to do these things, but our app also thinks, right? Our app is meant to perform something above and beyond just being a robotic server. It's meant to process information, take input in, decide what needs to get done, and then either retrieve, edit, delete things, and then respond back to the user. So that's conceptually what the controller is. So if anyone's like, hey, describe the MVC model, because that'd be something I would ask during like mock interviews. Hey, you worked with all these things, like talk to me about the MVC model and how you would implement it within an application. That would be an interview question I would ask somebody graduating from a immersive cohort, especially knowing that you built this stuff out, because I want you to understand this. So what we're going to do now is we're going into this user's controller, right? And the user's controller is for new users. That's what we want. This file is going to support our new users. And what we need to do is kind of set this file up. And we have to do a lot of that. Let me just zoom in a little bit. We have to.
Sorry to stop you, Joe. The front page with everything we put in, it's not showing up.
Okay. Do you get a specific error message?
No, I'm not getting any errors.
Okay. I stopped sharing. Why don't you share? We'll take a quick look. If we can figure it out. All right. Oh, so what I see here is, where it says index route, right?
Yep.
All right. So anyone want to point it out? I'm just curious. I mean, I
do.
You have two definitions for your index route defined, so it doesn't actually get to the second one.
Wait, what?
31, line 31.
On 31 and 35?
It only takes one route.
Oh.
Yeah. So delete that. Yeah. Remember, think of like these routes as a big if-else statement. The first matching condition executes the route. That second route would have never, ever gotten hit because of the route before it always resolved to true. It was always true, so it never got hit.
But no.
You may have the same problem I have. There's two index EJSs, so make sure you're in the user one.
Oh yeah, if you're in messages, yeah, you put it all in the wrong one.
Oh.
So just copy whatever in that index right there. Just take all of that, cut it out of there, and put it into the other index EJS. Yeah, and save that. You should. There you go. Heyo.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Stop. Share. Boom. Cool. Awesome. Let's go back here. Let's take it away. All right. So we're going to start configuring the user's controller. Right. So I'm going to say const express is equal to require express. We need to import express, and particularly to do router. Right. That's really what we're going to use. You learned router yesterday, so I'm going to do user and I'm doing user lowercase here. So once again, when this was created by the other instructor, they had their reasonings for creating a user lowercase and a user uppercase. Yeah, I think when you did it with Matt, it was called router. I always tend to kind of go the router side, but it's in the documentation, so I'm not gonna change it. We're going to kind of invoke the router functionality out of the router method, and then const user uppercase is equal to require. And we're going to go up to models, users.js, right? We haven't created this yet, right? I mean, the file's created. I believe the file's in models, but we haven't added anything. And models is where we are going to create the functionality for our, create our schema, use a model that imports that schema, and then we can create users based on that model. Right? So I always think of like a model as a prototype of something, like a mold of something, and the schema as the characteristics that define that mold, like the material that's being used, the width and heights of the dimensions of the thing. So the model is a working implementation of the actual schema. That's kind of how I see it. We're going to go down here. We're going to say user.get, because now that we're in here, we can use this new router construct, and we can say, hey, new rec res, and then res.render, and we're going to render users new EJS, and then the last thing we need to do is export this functionality. Module.exports, exports is equal to user, okay? So doing this will import all of the things we need, create a route that will render the new EJS file that we just created, and export it so that we can use this functionality someplace else, okay? So here we go. Let me just select that out. Let's make sure everyone's good with it. Sweet. Who's using my emoji?
I always do. Whoever's teaching, I try to use their emoji.
Okay. Oh, you got one for, you created one for Matt and Jerica?
Matt has the muffin.
Mm.
And Jerica, we haven't created one, but the dog just seems to fit, since her dog's always in the background.
Sweet. Oof. Use. Okay. I think we're good. All right, let me take a look. 16, 17, 18, 19, we're about there. Let this thing go. In order to use the controller where we want to use it, right? Because it's still our server that is the one fielding these requests. Server gets hit, our server uses the routes to determine what to do, and if we can import that controller, we can then just say, hey, for these particular routes, use that controller, send every request over to those servers, right? So I'm just going to create a little space here. We'll be adding more throughout the day also. And so here, what we want to do, I'm going to create a const user controller is equal to, we're going to require, right? Where we're at, there is a controllers folder, so that requires just the dot. Controllers users.js. Just move this over a little bit so you can see, right? And then we'd use the app.use, right? It's kind of also app.use is like used for middleware, and this is kind of what it's acting like. The router is acting kind of like middleware. We're going to say users, and we're going to say user controller. So what happens here is any routes that come in to /users, we're going to send that information over to the user's controller, and then it fields all additional requests at that time. Okay? It's really all we need to do. It's one little command.
Jeff?
Yeah, what's up?
So this part doesn't have to be at the top. It really doesn't matter where it's placed.
So it doesn't matter where it's placed because this is a very specific route, right? I mean, most of the time I always assign variables at the very top of the file, right? Define them at the top. I can use them anywhere. In instances like this, where this particular route or this controller, these two things are like together forever, I'm never going to reference user controller anywhere in this file, but here, you kind of keep them together just to show the relationship. Okay, most of the time though, once again, I always go up here and define things at the very top and then use them later. So I might, teaching another class at a different point in time, I might have like added a section here and just said like controllers, and then imported all the controllers and then used them in another section called routes like we're doing here. It all depends how you want to structure it. Okay, whatever you do, try to be consistent with it so that when you are troubleshooting your own apps later on down the line, you have a pattern that you can always go back to and know that these things are always where you expect to find them versus sprinkled throughout in different ways. Plus your team is going to have a certain way. But this is kind of a standard way that I've seen other instructors teach. I've seen it build out in the real world, and that's just the way that I've seen it. So that's our users controller, right?
And so what did you say this did again? It makes it so that the server isn't fielding the requests anymore?
Well, the server originally gets the first request, right? The server is the only thing listening, right? See this port? So the server listens, and then the server makes a decision. The server is kind of like a controller, maybe. It has to do some management of when things come in, what do I do? The server says, like, stuff's coming in all the time from all these different routes. How do you want me to handle this information, right? And right here, we just tell the server, like, hey, anything that comes to the MEEN app, you handle that. And the server's like, cool, I'll handle it. But we have other pieces of the app that I don't want you necessarily to handle. I want you to hand that functionality off. I want you to redirect that request someplace else, and that other thing knows what to do. It's going to contain hundreds of lines of code, and it will know what to do, so I don't have to include 100 lines of code in this file. I want my server file to be as streamlined as possible. I want to do segmentation of kind of like processes and concerns, right? And so if this route is dealing with new users, then I want to create a route or a controller that deals solely with new users. That's really all I want to do. And as your app grows and as there's more functionality, segmenting it like this makes it easier to manage the code, right? Because now I know all new user functionality is in that file. Let's go to that file. Versus including it here and sprinkling like this controller all the way up here and then having a route down here and then everything else, it can get kind of messy. What I've seen is breaking files down into smaller files based on functionality is a best practice. And it makes it easier for someone to look at code and to kind of troubleshoot, because the more you break something down, the more testable the unit is. Okay? And that's kind of what we're doing here. Anything that comes in on /users now is handed off to the user's controller, and the server's just like, I don't really know what the hell's going on. It's gave it to the user's controller. It's going to do it. Cool. So now we just need to do one thing. We're going to go to this users index right here. So I'm going to do this. Finally, you need to update the URL in our index users. So we did have this welcome, right? And the welcome was like, hey, welcome. And we're going to ask them to do either two things here. Sign up. I think it's already done, unless we're editing. Let me see. Oh, here we go. That's it. So let me do this. Let me just move this over just a little bit. Do you see how the href here is the one thing that needs to be added to this anchor tag? Or we have to update the href. Okay? So let me just move this over just a little bit.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm noticing, the markdown doesn't quite match the folder structure. The controller is actually called users_controller.js.
Mm-hmm.
But in the markdown, it's telling us to require controllers/users.js.
Oh, so let me take a look here. Controllers, sessions, yeah. So that also then, let's go back to this then. Yeah, if it is that, then that's the naming convention. So that's another thing that I think, what I think is, let me see, controller, is that the other instructor must have made the updates and they just didn't update the file. So we'll go back here and we'll make that edit. So good looking out there. Okay, so in controllers, the name of the file is users controller, right? And it is just singular, right? Controller, right? Okay. So we need to reference the name of the file correctly. Okay, I'm gonna go back in here. And now we're just gonna do this one thing, right? So I see here that the URL, the anchor tag, once it's clicked, needs to update the URL. And that's gonna go to, sessions new, are we? Oh, right here. Users new. So that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to go here. I'm going to change this to be users new. That's it. Once again, I will copy that. I'll select that out. You have it. Okay. So now when we click on it, it would take us someplace else. All right? That's the whole idea. Anchor tags are now how we direct our users back to the server to request different types of resources. Okay? I think if I open this up, I refresh it, I see new users. So if I sign up, okay, so it can't get the users new yet. We have to create that, right? I don't think we have, oh no, we do have new users. So that would tell me something else is happening. Let me stop my server. Start the server again. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. Let's make sure the server works. And if we sign up, okay, cannot get users new. Let's take a look and see what's happening with users new. Did I mistype something? Users controllers, users new, get new. Is it render users, right?
I think it has to deal with how the file names were named. It's on server.js. We have .controllers/users.js, but it's actually controllers/users_controller.js.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I had renamed it here. Oh, you know what? I didn't save the file. That was why. So I made the edit, but I didn't save it. So I'm going to save it now. So it should Can I find partials head? I'm just breaking this thing here. Refresh this. Let me see. Now I'm breaking the partials head. Can I find file partials head? And so I'm going to go to the users here because that's probably where it is, right? If I'm calling here, should go up to partials head. I'm going to just do this. I'm going to test something out just to see.
You got to transverse up, so you got to put the.
There's another dot needed.
Got it. Let's take a look. Oh, there we go. Cool. So that means if we're transversing up there, we'll have to transverse up there as well, right? So both in the new and the head, we have to transverse up to the partials, okay? Okay, so now we got it. Okay. I'm just going to make a note to update the README later for users, for controllers. Okay. Awesome. And for this also, for partials, right? Not that partials. Okay. Cool. So we're testing it out,
Joe?
right? Yeah.
Mine is still broken. Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, okay, you want to share it and let's take a look because it looks like there's just a handful of things that we're going to need to, at least the changes that were pointed out. Let's just take a look. Oh, let me stop sharing. Yeah, who wants to share first?
I'll go first.
Okay, let's take a look. All right, so what are you getting here? Cannot find module controllers, users underscore controllers, right? All right.
Hey, Thad, I think you have controller spelled wrong.
Yep, I do.
On 34? Yep.
Yeah, in both spots, actually. Keep going.
Man, that's amazing.
Make sure that works.
Nice.
Looks good. All right.
Mute.
Who's next?
Okay. I'm getting cannot get new.
Okay. So you're getting cannot get new. So that had to do with the, all right. So originally that had to do with the issue that I had, that I didn't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think and then I had the partials issues after that. So what's going on with this? And you saved the file, you ran it, you can guarantee that it does not. All right.
Yeah, I'm not getting an error in NodeMon. That's the weird part.
Okay. Go back just to the default route again. I just want to, default route, I just want to test it. Go back.
No, I'm not getting it.
All right, so it is working because that's the error that I had gotten after I fixed it. So just go in there and put, we're doing it in the users, not there, right? It's in the new.ejs. There, a dot there. Save that. And do it in the sessions one also when you're done with that. Do it in sessions. I just want to cover the base on both. Put a dot there. Awesome. Save that. Let's run it.
I think you have one too many dots in your index.
Oh, go to your index.
Because you're trying to go up a folder
Oh,
level.
yeah. So that's the issue. Yeah. There we go. Click on sign up. There you go.
Cool.
Good.
Thank you.
All these dots, all these crazy dots. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look.
So I have the.
Can I look up? It failed to look up view users new in the directory users. Okay, so it failed to look up the view. Now your default route works, right?
Right.
Okay, as long as your default route is working, let's take a look. All right, there you go. But when you click on sign up, you get the error, right? Unable to look up use. So that's going to be some sort of path thing, right?
Right.
So
I think it says user.new/new.js. It needs to be users/new.ejs.
Where's that, Jeremy?
The first line of the error that says failed to look up view user/. And
so it's users, right? Yeah,
Okay. Where is that?
that's in the controller, right? Oh, no.
Here?
Would it be that? Let me take a look.
Might be it.
Is it the controller, right?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no.
I have mine for render users because the name of the folder is users.
Oh, use.
So take a look at your, put an S there. Yeah, put an S there, save it. Okay. Try doing it again. Let's see. There you go. Nope. Failed to look up view users. No, in view directory, right? So what are we missing here? Users, we have the users directory there. You have users there. You have new.
I think it's that there's a slash on the front of that render. And I think usually you just need.
Oh, yeah, get rid of that slash. Yeah. Go look out.
Okay. That, I guess, was the S.
Yeah. And the slash, though. The slash would break it as well.
Yeah, I didn't have the slash, and then I put the slash.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it was just the S.
Sweet. Cool. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, mine isn't working either.
Okay. Show it. Could not find the file. So I think that's an issue with using a double dot instead of a single dot. So go into the user's new EJS file. Keep going, keep going, keep going, down, 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 stop, right there. Put another dot on line 4. There you go. Put that, save it. See if it works. There you go. Sweet. All right, we're good? We are good. All right. Sharing my screen. Oh, hold on a second. Let me go sharing that. Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah. I was just reproducing that error. Like if you do, it may seem like, hey, I'm just going to put a / there because it looks like it should be there, but you don't. If you do, it breaks it. If you get rid of that, these routes over here that you render, it kind of knows where you're at. This is a path, but it already knows where it's at, and it's going to take you directly into users. There's no reason to, this isn't a route at this point in time. It's a path. Let's go there, and now we have that. Create a user. Cool. Did our server. Just going to see. We'll just finish this up, and then we'll take a break. So inside of our session, so I'm going to go into our sessions controller. Okay. And in our sessions controller, we're going to set this thing up also. Const express is equal to require express, same as before. Const sessions is equal to express.router. Once again, that's just the naming convention the other instructor decided to use. Before it was user, now it's sessions. Then we're going to say sessions.get. If somebody wants to hit the new route, then that must mean they want to create a new user. We're going to say rec res, and then we're going to add res.render, right? No / sessions new EJS, okay? And the only thing we need to do now for this particular file is do module.exports is equal to sessions, okay?
Joe, on line 4, I think you misspelled sessions.
Oh, yes, I did. There we go. Okay, so let's make sure we're good to go. Link. Cool. Make sure everybody has that. That looks good syntactically, and then misspell it. Awesome. Okay. Now,
okay, I know you've covered this before, Joe, and it's kind of off subject, but you gotta remind me. Why don't you use semicolons?
So semicolons aren't necessarily required, right? I mean, you've seen the code working up till now, and there's tools out there that when I'm so used to working with something like React that has a transpiler that takes all the code and then converts it into ES5 code from ES6 to ES5, and it adds the semicolons. So there's tools out there that do that for me that I just feel like if my code is going to run fine without it, then I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to leverage another tool that will add them in for me when I need it. That's really just the way it is for me. Okay, I mean, if you look online and do some research, they're going to say like, hey, a good developer always uses semicolons, but things are changing now where if you look at a lot of React code that's written, you will not find semicolons. People tend not to do it because it was a thing of the past that the tools wouldn't add it. And if you did try to like minimize the file. So ultimately what happens is this. The minimization is this. If I minimize this file, right, the difference between a JavaScript file and a js.min file, right, is this. It moves everything up so that it's in line with itself. It removes all white spaces. But if it does that and there's no semicolon there, then the code breaks. Okay?
Gotcha. I was just curious. I know you've mentioned it before. I was like, I can't remember why.
Yeah, that's just my own preference. I don't know. Does Matt use semicolons? I don't remember if I saw him using it either.
Yeah, he does.
He does? Yeah, and there's, you know, in the documentation, they didn't include any semicolons too. So.
Right, which is why I was like, I'm so like, because I feel like I've used a site that's called JS Hint, where it like gives you help if you're like missing stuff or typos, and it always yells at you if you're missing semicolons.
Yeah, I mean, once again, learning the code, you should be using semicolons, but at this point in time, if it means like going back and re-editing to get the semicolons to visually make it look good, I wouldn't bother. Not at this point. All right, so we're going to go into our server.js now that we have that, right? Let's go hit our server.js. I'm going to get some space here, right? That was for our users controller. So maybe just make a note, users controller. And now we're going to deal with our sessions controller, okay? And const sessions controller is equal to require. It's going to move this over, right? And we know that the file is right there. It's in the controllers. And because of the naming convention, right? It's not what's in the README file. It's it's sessions underscore controller.js, okay? It's in the README file is incorrect. That's not the naming convention here for the tool that automated it. Once we just have reference to it, we can say app.use and do users. Once that route is hit, is it users? Let me see. Oh, it's sessions, I'm sorry, sessions. Once sessions is hit, we are then going to call the sessions controller. Okay? That's the difference. Just adding that one line there. Okay. Strike it out. Importing it, only a single dot here because we're all within the same file structure. So we just need to, from server, find controllers, which is right next to it, and then go into controllers. Okay? And the only other thing we're going to need to do really is, you know, the difference between the user's new EJS and the sessions new EJS had to deal with the anchor tag, right? What's it? Let me see. Yeah, index EJS. I'm sorry, it was our index EJS right here. In this index EJS this was the href was to take us to users new, and now we want to change this particular one to be sessions new. Okay, it's all we're adding here. It's one small thing to our index EJS file. So they click on a button to sign up, they get redirected to users new. You click on a button to log in, they are going to get this. Go to sessions new. Once again, and the routes are the mechanism by which we speak to the server. The server is listening and responding to these kind of directives. Okay? Here's something, it does something. I'm just going to test it. I got it. I go here. Right? I'm going to refresh. Well, that works. I'm going to go back, obviously, to the main route. Awesome. Going to click on login. And now it says cannot get. I'm just going to make sure this still works. All right. So this must mean this is a sessions new. Cannot get. Oh, I have two. Do I? Is it misspelled? Sessions new. All right. Sessions controller. Sessions control. Everything looks good there.
I think you have to save your server.js job.
Oh, I didn't save it. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So sign up, log in. Cool. We didn't set up anything else besides just that. Okay. Let's create some space there. Just make sure.
So wait, where does that go?
Where
that
does
last
what?
part? That last part you just did? Is it? It's in the index.
Oh,
just
it's
underneath?
in the index. Yeah, the main file, right? The index file is what all users hit when they come to the server for the first time.
Oh, I see. You're just editing that.
This is the one line. Yeah, we just edited the href. Yeah, that's it. Just make sure it works. If it works, our server is good. Cool. All servers working. Boom. So just give me a thumbs up. All servers working. Confirm that. We can go to lunch. And then we'll finish this up when we get back. Just have a few more things to do. Once we complete that, it'll only take us maybe 40 minutes, an hour when we come back, and then you'll jump into lab time where you can really start working with the stuff. You can see why, like, all this typing out causes a lot of errors. In the end, pick one of the either lectures, instructor examples, your code-alongs, or a lab, and as the premise for your final project. I'm all about like using that as the template. So don't try to be one of those people that are like, I'm going to type everything from scratch because I really, really want to understand everything that's happening inside this file, right? If you really want to understand what's happening inside the file, then just write comments. Explain to yourself what's going on, but typing it out is going to lead to errors. I know it happens to me all the time, and you're seeing it's happening, but I would prefer that you move forward and build more functionality, knowing that you understand this enough that you could probably never just write most of it from scratch on your own, but if you copy and paste it, you could kind of explain it. All right, so if somebody was like, what does this do again? I might even have to look that up. Use new URL parse. I have to go look it up and be like, I don't know what that thing was. I just know I need it. And if somebody told me they needed additional functionality, then I would take a look, and if this needs to be false for some reason, I would understand then why that needs to be false. But just kind of shooting from the hip. Like something like this, I always have to look up and be like, what is this thing again? Somebody always asks me, well, why is it false and not true? And I have to look it up. And it just deals with input, kind of more advanced objects that it can take in. We're good? Awesome. Cool. Server's working. Everything's good. We're going to leave it off here. Won't do anything with creating users. We'll pick it up with creating users when we come back. So let's go to lunch. Come back from lunch. We'll jump into the rest of it. Cool. I will see everyone back. Not bad.